I wish to welcome everyone to this third session of our series of COVID-19 ICT Advisory Committee webinars for potential innovators. As a country, we are proud of the support and responsibility that has been exhibited by citizens, and I salute the ICT fraternity, and especially the young people, for rising up to the occasion and ensuring that we as a country can overcome this pandemic. As we continue to restructure our lifestyles around the new normal, it is incumbent upon each and every one of us to continue being vigilant and for the technology sector to remain resolute on developing cutting-edge strategies of coping beyond this pandemic. This resolve is underpinned in the webinar's theme, Building Forward Stronger, Beyond Response and Recovery Towards Resilient Collaboration. When I inaugurated the COVID-19 ICT Advisory Committee nearly 6 months ago, none of us had the end game in sight. I doubt whether we still do. However, today I can proudly state that from the overwhelming response and submissions received from over 700 potential innovations, the country is richly endowed with a bedrock of great minds, with ideas that shall change and transform the way we operate as a society. This clearly reiterates our Kenyan spirit to adapt and synergize during these great times of need. As we prepare to listen to the innovations that will be showcased today, I thank all the partners who are working along with us in this journey and are also helping us realize tangible outputs as we strive to scale up the innovation so far presented. I would like to particularly extend my sincere appreciation to the UNDP Kenya, represented here by Mr. Walid Badawi, World Economic Forum, represented by Ms. Elsie Kanza, and the Standard Chartered Kenya, represented by Ms. Susan Joroge. Thank you for joining us today, and we seek your further support as we gear up to the next level. I would also like to pass on my appreciation to the COVID-19 ICT Advisory Committee, led by the chairperson, Mrs. Mercy Wanjau. As the committee terms nears its end, my ministry will see how best to progress this agenda. Various governance and policy mitigation recommendations have already been presented to my office for the progression. It is then my desire to see the ministry and its various agencies oversee the uptake, implementation, and scaling up of the various innovations already presented. Currently, the Kenya's digital economy strategy is undergoing stakeholders review, and a team that includes the National Treasury and my ministry is working towards ensuring that we reap big from the digital dividends. As a sector, we are presented with myriad opportunities and we cannot afford to fail. Together, let us synergize and support this agenda as the envisaged benefits are enormous globally. The most profitable blue chip companies globally are technology-based. My wish and vision is for Kenya to have a stake in this space. I dream of the day the Nairobi stock market will be heralded by homegrown technology companies competing in the global arena. We can pursue this vision by scaling up the various innovations presented to the committee. We would like to nurture and incubate technology giants who shall provide jobs to our innovative youth and develop solutions that can be adopted and exported globally. Let me state that the government is also committed to better, efficient, and timely service delivery, and we shall continue to enhance our capacity to deliver upon this. Technology has proved to be the bedrock of our everyday work environment, with most critical services being delivered remotely. Part of my ministry's mandate is to actively pursue the narrowing of the technology and the intelligence divides. As Minister of ICT, I therefore implore on you all to yield to our higher calling to serve humanity and also deploy technology to make the world a better place. This is no doubt in my mind that technology, when mainstreamed ethically and effectively, is an equalizer across all social and economic divides. Thank you once again. I hereby declare this third webinar by the COVID-19 ICT Advisory Committee Showcase officially opened. Signed, Joe Musheru. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, PS Jerome, for the remarks, and I think it aptly puts into context why we're here and potentially why we need to collaborate and to scale innovations. Without further ado, let me introduce Ms. Mercy Wanjau, who has been the chair for the COVID-19 ICT Advisory Committee.
Thank you very much, Philip. Indeed, we are very delighted to hold this webinar coming towards the end of our term. And I would like to propose to share the screen and give a quick rundown of the achievements we have made before making a few remarks. The mandate of the advisory committee was captured in a few key items. Firstly, it was to coordinate the ICT-specific responses to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. And we will see shortly some of the things that we put in place, the initiatives, so that we could support the national and the county emergency response committees on the interventions that could be put in place. One of the other TORs was also to establish an enabling environment that would stimulate economic development through ICTs during this time and even after. And this entailed coordinating of innovators, academia, well-wishers, the private sector on the utilization of these resources, and finally advice on key ICT initiatives, how the scaling up could happen, the products and job creation opportunities, as well as sustainability and ubiquitous digital learning. This paved the way for a very exciting journey for this committee. We have done 2 rounds for calls for innovations and received over 700 submissions. Out of those, 85 have been identified for support and scale up. And we have held 2 webinars to give selected innovators an opportunity to showcase their solutions. And we are delighted to report that out of this, some engagements are already happening. In terms of some of the recommendations that we see coming out of this at a policy standpoint level is the need for Kenya to begin to evolve a framework on digital learning so that this would then institutionalize the use of ICTs as part of curriculum and also the allocation of resources to enable this. Secondly, is the rush for resources is on, and hence the need to commercialize the white spaces, which would provide additional opportunities and additional resources to deploy these innovations. Thirdly, it has come alive in Kenya that the gig economy is growing and is deepening. And as a result, the need for the Communications Authority to consider licensing individuals as courier service providers in order to formally support the gig economy. In the last couple of months, we also did issue draft guidance notes on access to data by innovators, as this would enable to drive e-commerce and the digital economy, and also provide a framework for protection for consumers. In terms of supporting and scaling up of innovations, there have been a couple of asks from the innovators. Largely, innovators have been interested in funding, whether it be grants, low-cost capital, or equity. And for this, we have reached out to hubs and private sector support to advise and support on the funding for potential innovators. Other asks have constituted requests for linkages with the government and government agencies, as well as connections to potential innovators and accelerators. And this we have done, and we continue to do, so that we are able to obtain our desired objective at the end of all this, that no innovator will be left unattended to at the end of this exercise, that they will have clarity in terms of a way forward. So finally, going to the role of these innovations during COVID-19, we have seen a lot of these innovations, and largely the first one was to strengthen capacity, that this would be able to provide early warning, risk reduction, management of health risks, and preparedness for future threats, and we will hear some of these. Secondly, is that these innovations would provide useful insights to manage responses to the pandemic, as well as catalyze economic development and recovery, so that even as we look at the pandemic season that we are in, we are also very keen and positive on the rollout of the economy and growth out of the pandemic. And then lastly, to be able to leverage on these innovations to mitigate new and existing social inequalities, as have been brought out very starkly during this pandemic, and in this way ensure that environmental sustainability is retained and safeguarded, and that we are also able to achieve a more equal and equitable platform for participation, courtesy of these innovations. Going to the topic of the day on fostering an enabling environment for resilient innovation and ecosystem, we have identified a few key elements as elements that we will be making formal recommendations on from this task force, as these are key drivers in deepening the economic space for innovations and enabling the evolution of drivers towards sustainability. And with that, I would like to request to read through the remarks as I have them. In recent years, Kenya has made significant progress in fostering socio-economic development, and strong programs coupled with international investments, has led to improvements in regards to many of the development goals, such as education, health, gender equality, and leveraging on information and communication technology. However, social economic inclusion and poverty eradication still remain as a challenge. To address some of these challenges, Kenya has been making considerable strides towards establishing a more innovation-driven economy. In the realm of the Kenya Vision 2030 strategic plan, investments made in infrastructure, as well as private sector initiatives, have been able to steer the country in the right direction. This course has been reinforced through the Big Four agenda, a 5-year action plan that puts strategic importance on ICT as a key enabler to realize immediate priorities and aims to utilize and reap benefits of the digital revolution to achieve social economic development, poverty eradication, and the long-term goals of the country. Despite these successes, there are still a variety of issues that need to be addressed in the establishment of an ICT-centric innovation ecosystem. The envisioned innovation ecosystem is currently a bit stagnated, with missing linkages and inadequately guided innovation dynamics to enable entrepreneurs create high growth innovation and businesses arising out of this. These are some of the aspects that we identified, listening to the innovators, listening to some of the possible partners. We were able to identify missing linkages. And this brought us to the conclusion that there is need for further action to build up factors like private investment, last mile connectivity, ICT skills, and entrepreneurial support networks in particular. If these issues are addressed effectively, in our view, the country will be well positioned to become a regional leader in several key areas within the ICT sector. And some of the key areas that need to be addressed in working towards this kind of ecosystem are what is displayed on the screen. And I will go through the detailed aspect of some of them. Policy and regulation. Many regulatory and policy changes under the Kenya Vision 2030 led to the growth of the economy and the development of the ICT ecosystem. However, many policies appear to be incomplete and not entirely engaging on the digital innovation ecosystem. Some policies are outdated or are pending legislative reform, and this exercise has highlighted the need to accelerate this process. Though the public sector is aware of its role on innovation, it is clear from the scope of the existing policies and programs that more is needed to stimulate funding, to incentivize investment, to nurture entrepreneurship and innovation, as well as to strengthen the intellectual property framework. Due to lack of a comprehensive mechanism for engagement of innovators, public sector is unable to nurture an enabling environment that will lead to private sector leadership in the ecosystem. This is fueled by the low level of trust between stakeholders and limited common understanding of the major issues and opportunities. This is one of the key recommendations that this task force will be making. And we are thankful that in the last half year or so, government has embarked on a very determined effort for multi-sectoral collaboration, which we believe will be a key beneficiary out of this process to drive common dialogue and a common way forward. The second item is on infrastructure, and programs. Hard infrastructure has seen tremendous growth in Kenya, particularly with respect to mobile phone penetration and broadband due to private and public investments. However, quality hard infrastructure is concentrated within urban areas with challenges in achieving the last mile connectivity. This has resulted to slower development of soft infrastructure with limitation to the same in urban areas. Thus, innovators in these nascent clusters are struggling to develop appropriate solutions. Additionally, significant improvements will be necessary in regard to soft infrastructure in order to foster inclusive innovation capacity throughout the country. This is a second formal recommendation that we will be making, which continues to highlight the urgency to close connectivity gaps, one of the mandates of the Communication Authority of Kenya, a commitment that we have scaled up during this period and intend to deepen in months coming forward. The third element is talents and champions. Because it became quite evident that while Kenya has quite some significant talent in this area, it does not entirely meet the demand of the ecosystem and requires improvement in terms of skill level and availability is necessary to develop a suitable skilled workforce to address current and future needs of industry and the ecosystem. There are some gaps in technical skills, especially advanced skills, and there is need for broader soft skills development. The primary focus will be on upgrade of skills and will be targeted towards digital literacy in schools, retooling curriculums, expansion of broadband access in schools through education broadband connectivity projects, and the creation of centers of excellence in higher education system. However, the persisting skill gap is preventing talent from moving to research, entrepreneurship, and innovation, something that would be a key factor in driving this forward. There are many programs there are many champions with programs addressing both soft skills and technical skills, but they operate in silos and do not have the necessary adequate support. And our hope in making this recommendation is that it would spur guidance and renewed efforts to upgrade skills and talent and the innovation ecosystem would then begin to experience reinvigoration and in creation of success stories. Networks and markets. Though there is sufficient domestic market size to get started, access for innovators was seen as limited due to challenges around transparency, fairness in procurement, and bias against local or Kenya-made innovations. Additionally, regional and international markets offer increased opportunities, but their access remains limited due to inefficient networks and linkages in the ecosystem. Both formal and informal networks that foster market access exist in the ecosystem, but they are not tailored to fully support the dynamics required in an ICT-centric ecosystem. And this is a factor that we look towards to alleviation of barriers that would then lead to creation of businesses and on a sustainable platform. There is therefore need to foster and nurture innovation, to develop networks, and to facilitate global export. On to the fifth item, culture and economy and the community. Entrepreneurial business culture in Kenya is seen as developing, but at an early age. This is partly due to the lack of jobs in the economy, leading to young people moving towards being entrepreneurs. Many operate in the formal sector, and business ecosystems such as B2B, business to business, business to government, or business to consumer, B2C, are needed to help migrate them to the formal economy. This is an opportunity for digital entrepreneurs and should be nurtured vigorously by all stakeholders, especially in the private sector. Failure is not perceived well through support networks, and academia have been making and playing key roles in changing mindsets. Support networks are active in fostering appropriate business culture through events and projects in the ecosystem, but their efforts appear to be limited. Many countries and rural communities lack representation, and the recommendation that we would be making out of this is the need for strengthening community building with the aim to increase trust, increase networking, and engagement in the ecosystem. Going on to the last item on capital and resource, I had indicated earlier that this has constituted the ask for quite a number of the entrepreneurs, out of noting that access to capital is very limited in Kenya, and more notably, access to capital in the digital innovation ecosystem. The few existing public sector funds appear to be insufficient, and it is not clear what the method of access might be. There are many efforts to encourage foreign direct investment, including various new instruments, such as special economic zones. However, these instruments are at an early phase of development and are not adequate to attract resources, especially the ICT ecosystem. We noted that research funding is still insufficient and directed at technical knowledge generation rather than commercialization of research. A sizable amount of funding for development of innovations and capacity building is sourced from development partners. However, this does not qualify as a sustainable resource and would therefore not lead to a self-sufficient ecosystem internally. Without appropriate risk capital, funding entrepreneurs and their ideas is limiting opportunities in the Kenya digital ecosystem. And some entrepreneurs are trying to create innovative solutions for solving financing gaps, but they need support to make an impact. Without funding, startup formation and SME growth will be stalled, and consequently, the ecosystem will not be able to thrive. And this is indeed one of the other formal recommendations that we will be making. Coming to a conclusion, we have noted that a lot of programs are creating bridges and enabling digital innovators to address opportunities in Kenya, but these are limited. They also appear to be fragmented. They are often not well capitalized and they lack resources. And this is an issue of great constraint to many of them. Many communities appear to be built around their champions' interest, but there is a need to bring them together more often in order to solidify and grow the ecosystem. Resources are also needed for community mapping and for events to help entrepreneurs bootstrap and access markets even beyond Kenya. Champions with good practices do not receive adequate support as would be required. And this may be related to a misalignment of opportunities and resources. And because of this, the need for the private and the public sector to come together and support the ecosystem. The government is aware of its role as a public sector and is taking significant steps to remedy the current ecosystem. Of course, it is appreciated that this requires a multi-sectoral framework, a reaching out between the private, the public, and the civil community to enable this happen. And we are hopeful that as we move to make this formal recommendation, and thank you to the participation that we noticed on a call like this, on this webinar, that we are able to create visibility of this situation that would lead to engagement and growth as we move forward. So this brings me to the end of my remarks, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Chair. Quickly, I think I would like to request the Secretariat if they can avail the slides, because we have a couple of partners in the webinar who may be interested to have a deep dive on the amazing presentation that you've given us. Quickly, let me go to Mr. Walid Badawi, a good friend, the resident representative for the United Nations Development Program. He will focus basically on how to scale up innovations and potentially the use cases that came out of the KONZA COVID-19 challenge. Mr. Walid.
Thank you so much, Philip, and indeed a good friend. When Thunderbird, my former graduate school, comes calling, I certainly will answer. And it was great to hear the two presentations by P.S. Jerome and Ms. Wanjao, very comprehensive indeed. And I think we, from our side as UNDP, we echo many of the policy recommendations and fully supportive of those efforts. So maybe at the outset, I think we cannot underestimate and appreciate the fora such as this one that you're convening here, Philip, to allow us to discuss, share knowledge and ideas on how we can really build forward stronger and more resiliently during these very uncertain times. Let me say that indeed for us as UNDP and working within the UN family, we are running a number of initiatives at global, regional, and country levels that are ongoing to provide support to governments and people around the world to recover from COVID-19. We should never underestimate the magnitude of the challenge that we're facing. And as UNDP, we've done an assessment earlier in the year. And for the first time since measurement began in 1990, human development is indeed on track to decline for the very first time since then. But with every crisis comes an opportunity, and I think that's really where we are focused today, and looking at how can we take those opportunities to build better in the future. And for us as UNDP, we've been looking at this at multiple levels. And if we take Kenya as a case in point, looking at both the enabling policy framework, and Ms. Wanjao talked about a number of the recommendations that the ICT Advisory Committee is making, which we fully endorse. And how do these recommendations then find their way into the national socioeconomic recovery strategy planning of the country? Under the leadership of National Treasury and the State Department of Planning, as UNDP, we've been supporting that effort, which is putting in place a recovery strategy for the next 2 years, 24 months. But also at the subnational level, working with the Council of Governors, we've been supporting the county level socioeconomic re-engineering and recovery strategy. But also we've been designated by by the Secretary General of the United Nations to lead the UN's own socioeconomic response planning. And I can assure you, at all of these levels, the issue of ICT and innovation is really at the center of our thinking and our interventions to see how that recovery can be made better and more resilient and greener. So let me come to an initiative that is a key one for us, and that is our SDG Accelerator Lab, which we were very proud to inaugurate this in September 2019 on the sidelines of the General Assembly under the leadership of CS Muchero, leading the government of Kenya, but also our UN resident coordinator. And we signed a communique together with the Rockefeller Foundation and the Center for Global Action at the University of California, Berkeley, to establish this SDG Accelerator Lab, which is a way to actually bring multiple stakeholders in a partnership framework that can unlock financing and innovations to tackle complex development challenges. Let me say that this Kenya launch was also coinciding with a similar initiative that UNDP was rolling out globally to set up 60 accelerator labs around the world, including in Kenya, to do precisely that, to unearth solutions for endemic development challenges through local innovations and trying to bring these up to the fore to interrogate, what are those things that these young innovators, whether technology related or not, and what do they need? And I think Ms. Manjao raised a number of issues, the financing ecosystem, IP, access to markets, and many others that I think we resonate with. But the Accelerator Lab is therefore a way to try and actually address this. So the lab is actively engaged to support innovators gain access to training, knowledge, networks, financial resources to be able to grow and scale up their ideas and solutions. And we're so happy to have co-created this with the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs. We currently have set in place a governance structure with priority areas originating from the Big Four agenda. And we are now actually seeing some very concrete, tangible innovations that we've unearthed to be supported. So earlier this year, we were pleased to partner with CONSA, Technopolis, and the Ministry of ICT to support the Great COVID-19 Innovation Challenge, as we know. And this really focused on 3 areas of innovations: decent work, food systems, and healthcare. And it created an opportunity, this call, for citizens to share their ideas on how some of the country's urgent needs can really be met. And what this validated for us is that Kenya is a hub of brilliance and creativity. We really saw over 300 ideas and solutions, ranging from those that are reimagining the workplace and engaging in technology to ensure safety and productivity of workers. We've seen innovations that are using big data and 4IR technologies to better understand human behaviors and attitudes and make policy recommendations also on organizational and market decisions from an informed perspective. And we've seen others that are responding to our current context by adopting new ways of connecting, making payments, learning, and engaging customers through technology. So the winners from this challenge, the 3 winners from this challenge, will be joined by 12 other finalists in the second phase of this challenge, which is an acceleration program aimed at supporting them to scale and develop their innovations to market. Let me just mention the 3 winners that emerged from this great COVID-19 challenge. The first place was Startup Suite, a platform that seeks to streamline business functions for SMEs that are working remotely, of course, because of COVID-19. The second place was Zinake, a cloud-based platform that connects temporary workers to job opportunities in their locality at the click of a button. And the third place was Garden Fresh, a localized agri-food system that provides year-round growing of food crops to promote urban access to sustainable food. Now, this challenge and many others that we have also supported under the umbrella of Generation Unlimited have clearly brought home the need for significant efforts to support these local innovations. We know that Kenya's innovators are in need of financial and technical support to enable them to develop their ideas to market and create ready-made products and services. And so really through the Accelerator Lab, we hope to create that space to be able to provide that next level of support that Ms. Wanjao also alluded to. We are collaborating with Hackster, which is the world's fastest growing developer community for learning, programming, and building hardware. And we are working with them and with local innovators to develop, for example, technologies around infrared contactless thermometers, pulse oximeters, and touchless hand faucets. And these devices will be made available to local hubs so that more people can learn from them and utilize them, so that we can grow and create and build on these local innovations. Also at the regional level, and through you, Philip, guiding our work on this front, UNDP is working towards the development of a project that is aimed at delivering an agile UNDP Africa digital strategy and programmatic offer that is supported by multi-stakeholder digital collaborative platforms. And so how we link, for example, our SDG Accelerator Lab to this regional offer by UNDP is part of that. And this project is going to focus on achieving increased access to skills and reach of fourth industrial revolution technologies. It will look at scaled up utilization of these innovations within an enabling policy environment. It's going to share knowledge and create management and leadership structures in the 4IR space. And we're very pleased that Kenya is actually one of the 7 early action countries that will be benefiting under this regional program, thereby allowing us to, connect national interventions to global ones and regional ones. So it will be very, very good for us under the SDG Accelerator Lab, of course, to look at the recommendations that have come through the ICT Advisory Committee as it winds down its work, and see how we can certainly give velocity and momentum to those areas of gap, whether it's on the policy side or on the downstream implementation side that can enable these innovators to really thrive and grow their businesses to the scale that we would like as a real model for building forward better. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you so much, Walid. In the meantime, I encourage my panelists to look at the Q&A and see if they can respond. I will also be, and I think Walid will not mind this, if the Secretary can also avail a way within which we can be contacted for the initiatives that we've mentioned, of course, in a very structured manner, to see how we can take forward the recommendations. And talking about the 4IR and private sector, let me introduce Dr. Elsie Kanza, the head of Africa for the World Economic Forum, as we transition to the private sector phase of this conversation. Elsie.
Thank you very much, Philip, and thanks to the previous speakers, who I will very much echo as I share an initiative that we've been supporting at the forum called the Africa Growth Platform. So allow me to begin with the trigger for the Africa Growth Platform. According to the World Economic Forum Regional Risk Report in 2019, surveyed CEOs considered Africa's biggest risk youth unemployment and underemployment. This was quite distinct compared to other regions in the world where climate change was the leading risk, according to the CEOs in those regions. With this backdrop, over 400 million youth in Africa, 2/3 are unemployed and discouraged. So clearly a major challenge to contend with. 2020 Africa Youth Survey more positively indicates that despite these challenges, more than 70% of African youth say that they would like to start their own business within the next or over the next 5 years. This is echoed by the World Bank that found that Africa was the most entrepreneurial continent in the world. The challenge is that African SMEs, MSMEs struggle to thrive, struggle to scale. They stay micro. It's estimated that there are about 100 million MSMEs, and the majority of them are micro, meaning that they have less than 10 employees. The main challenge that underscores all of this is what it means for job creation in the continent, given that small businesses are the biggest employers worldwide. With this context in mind, the Africa Growth Platform was launched in September 2019 at the World Economic Forum on Africa meeting held in Cape Town last September. It is a big business response to create jobs by deliberately and intentionally partnering with small businesses in their supply chains, for instance, or value chains, or as service providers. So it's a B2B solution by and large. It is also an ecosystem approach seeking to foster collaboration and coordinate ongoing interventions by key stakeholders, including governments, investors, and educators. This very much echoes what was said by Chair Mercy Wanjao about the need to tackle the fragmentation that is currently underway. The first phase of the Africa Growth Platform consisted of mapping the priority needs of the SMEs and startups in particular. That was the initial focus, as well as mobilizing stakeholder support. And this was key because we also found in speaking to our various constituents that a lot of the interventions were on the supply side. They were supply side driven, not demand side driven. So yes, there's an overlap, but a question of prioritization was not consistent from the SME startup side vis-a-vis those stakeholders seeking to support them. In January 2020 in Davos, we launched the Davos Friends of the Africa Growth Platform, which is a community galvanizing global support to meet the AGP target of scaling 100 million SMEs and startups by 2025. So that was all good, and we were set to be on the right track, and then COVID-19 happened. And in March, April, as we're preparing to support countries in rolling out their national platforms, we had to pivot due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then the big challenge was how to support MSMEs to survive, no longer scaling, but really just to make it through the crisis. As an organization, the World Economic Forum launched the Regional Action Group for Africa to guide all of our support to sub-Saharan Africa. And particularly with respect to the Africa Growth Platform, we established a COVID-19 small business support network, essentially repurposing the community that we had already begun to build out to focus on this very deliberate and urgent task. What has been the impact thus far? Under the Small Business Support Network, the AGP focused on channeling various global solutions to help MSMEs survive, as I mentioned. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the kickoff by the Honorable C.S. Mshero in May for one particular initiative, the Coursera Workforce Recovery Initiative. Coursera is a champion of the forum's reskilling revolution. Through this initiative, they partnered with governments to provide free access to about 3,800 online courses. It is time bound. By the end of September, which was the deadline for governments to sign up, we had about 12 governments that made it: Ethiopia, Equatorial Guinea, Kenya, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Nigeria, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Somaliland, South Africa, and Uganda. So as we speak, we have thousands of citizens that are able to make the best of a wide array of digital skilling. I would like to make an appeal and a call for action, because the deadline for citizens to sign up is the end of October. And then the program will expire at the end of this year. It's very much targeted as a special intervention to deal and essentially sail through this COVID-19 pandemic peak period. The second initiative I'd like to highlight is an EDISI digital transformation for public servants. This is championed by a World Economic Forum technology pioneer and seeks to equip civil servants with critical skills to support what has been an upside of COVID-19 in Africa, which is essentially accelerating the digital transformation agenda. Ethiopia and Rwanda have already signed up, and other conversations are ongoing with various governments that see the need to boost the skills, particularly of the middle management and really the civil servants that that the public needs to interface with on a day-to-day basis. We also held experience sharing workshops with the Alibaba eFounder Fellows and Babson College. And I seem to recognize some of the participating entrepreneurs present on this call. We thank you for sharing your experience. And in particular, one of the striking findings was having some of the entrepreneurs say that COVID-19 was a blessing in disguise. They saw policymakers undertake radical reforms literally overnight that helped them to boost their business, but also play an active role in supporting their countries to make it through the crisis without suffering. So it's been a very interesting dynamic vis-a-vis the rest of the world, and certainly what we're seeing here in Europe. So where do we go from here? Now that we're starting to live with COVID-19, a big concern is how we build forward stronger, and in particular resilience. So yes, continue to support MSMEs, but really with the resilience lens. And in this regard, in September, the Regional Action Group for Africa launched an initiative to shape a resilient MSME landscape by 2030. And part of this entails building a resilience framework for sustainable business models. Again, some of the issues raised, particularly the key elements by Chairman Wanjau, Chairperson Wanjau, certainly resonate with some of the ideas that are put forward. And in this regard, I'd like to highlight a major continental initiative that we're now embarking to build upon that also emerged during this COVID-19 crisis, and that is the African Union Development Agency's MSME support program. It's an ambitious program to revolutionize continental capabilities to support MSMEs. It's focusing on three key areas, underpinned by a common digital platform. One is MSME Academy, two is an MSME marketplace, and lastly, MSME finance. And here, just building on the point that was made earlier about the need to mobilize capital, they're looking at very practical and innovative ways of looking at this problem, not so much by channeling direct funding, but by establishing a guarantee fund and working with, among other, central banks with a target of extending at least $5 billion of financing to MSMEs across the continent over the next 18 months. And then overall, the aim is to reach and register 1 million MSMEs, accounting for at least 1 million jobs by the end of 2021. In conclusion, I'm personally encouraged by these collective renewed efforts to combine forces. Let's make them count. At the end of the day, the results will be borne by the impact that we will have on the MSMEs across the continent. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elsie, as always, being very succinct. Just to mention that, again, to reiterate the call on the Coursera Workforce Recovery Initiative, we have a deadline. It's October 31. It is free of charge. Please, I suggest that you contact the Ministry of ICT. It was being signed through the Cabinet Secretary, through the Ajira program. So I suggest you do that, but I think we'll try and avail that information to the Secretariat. Quickly, let me transition over to Susan Joroge from Standard Chartered Bank.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having us as a bank on this call. I know, Philip, like you said at the beginning, some of the innovators on the call must be wondering what we're doing here. But I think the important point is for us to be able to highlight the role that banks are playing and the role that private sector is playing in helping to drive innovation for micro and small businesses. So just to set context, Standard Chartered's ambition is to be the most responsible and sustainable bank in Kenya. And we look at it in three areas. The first area is around sustainable finance, which is really our core business of lending. So, for example, not many people may be aware, but last year we injected about 12 billion shillings into micro and small businesses in Kenya, directly and indirectly. The second area is around our operations, so ourselves, how we operate financial crime compliance, conduct, the people we have on our teams. And I think COVID was very timely in showing everybody when you're on the front foot of already beginning your digital transformation and journey, you were able to push through this difficult situation. But it also pushed companies like ourselves and many others to really look at technology and the investment around it to be more significant. So the ability for colleagues to work from home, but more importantly as well, the investment that needs to come when you're a business that's leveraging technology, the investment that needs to come behind your cybersecurity and protection. And then the third area that we look at when we talk about sustainability and innovation is around tackling inequality. And from my fellow panelists from the beginning until my side, I think that's an area inevitably that we have to all look to address, and the SDGs. There we have a particular program, an incubation program called Women in Tech Incubator Program. It's specifically looking at women-led startups. And over the past 3 years, we've invested 50 million shillings in over 30 startup organizations. These are women-led, they're leveraging technology, and they're solving for a sustainable development goal. So I think a key question that inevitably comes up when you have private sector and potentially a bank on this type of conversation is, what role are you guys playing in all of this? What value can you bring to the table? So I think, first of all, there's definitely no denying that the financial sector must and has an integral role to play in providing a financial system that drives innovation and development, be it in Kenya or anywhere else in the world. Looking at that, Standard Chartered have an arm of our business which is called SC Ventures. And the role of that arm of our business is to promote innovation and invest in disruptive financial technology that explores different alternative models. And we do this because we're fully cognizant that the traditional models of banking and the traditional financial systems must evolve to start serving the society and the technology-driven economies that we're becoming. So this arm of the business partners with different fintechs to launch diverse projects using technology that ranges from AI to IoT to blockchain. So for example, we're currently working on a smart metering solution that will help a public, a county with public water and sanitation to improve how they track and monitor their water. The other one I think that I talked about was really the need to rethink access to capital and how the financial sector looks at that. It's a totally different model when you're talking to a tech innovator and their asset is an app or an algorithm or is in their head or is in their laptop. You can't ask the traditional credit questions that you've been asking. And we're very cognizant of that. And that's where, for us, our Women in Tech Incubation Program is also helping us as a business to start thinking in a different way. Because we know that startups need a different kind of support. We know that small, medium-sized businesses need a different kind of support. And we're actually changing our credit and our risk approaches to take that into consideration. There was a recent survey that was done by PwC, and 90% of the leaders of financial services says one of their biggest challenges is going to be around the innovations and speed of technology. And so being cognizant of that fact, there's a lot of catch-up to be done in the governance structures, in the compliance structures, in the fact that technology makes everything so global and international and fast that the traditional things that were in place for the industry have to change. That's clear and without saying. And I think it's really pushing us to do that. The other third area that I would like to touch on is it's really important that the innovators who are out there really start looking at the Sustainable Development Goals not as a societal or environmental issue, but as a business opportunity. And one of the things that we're doing as a bank, consciously taken the decision to say we are going to be proactively pursuing and supporting clients that are driving a positive social and environmental impact. Why is that? Because that social and environmental impact is where the need, the market, and the demand is created. So really looking at the SDGs as a business opportunity and not just as a societal opportunity. Because that's, I mean, the fact that there's an SDG issue means that there is a market and that there is a need for a product or a solution that has to be delivered. And so maybe to conclude, I'd say that, just on the investment part and looking at the SDGs, earlier this year, we released a SDG investment opportunity map. And just for Kenya alone, there's an investment opportunity of USD 10.3 billion just for digital access. 9 billion when we look at power, and more overall across 3 SDGs, there's 40 billion of investment opportunity. And our question is now to start asking, who are the clients or who are the partners that we can bring in that can really help us to drive that SDG agenda, to drive real development that creates value. So summarizing it very shortly, for sure, financial institutions have a significant role to play. We don't have all the answers. I think just like everybody else, technology is pushing us to move faster, but we are moving as fast as we can and realizing that that our existing models need to adapt to fit, the businesses that are today, that are startups, and those big businesses that they will become in the future. A quick call to action on our Women in Tech incubator program. It's a program we run with IBIS Africa. It's actually launching the 4th cohort this Thursday, so October 15th, and the application process will run until December 15th. So if there were any women startup entrepreneurs on this call or in this meeting that are already tech enabled, it could be a startup of 2-3 years and less, or a business idea, please do apply to our program. Your participation when you are selected is a 3 to 4 month incubation, and we also provide you with seed funding if you make it to the final 5 of 1 million shillings each. And we continue to work with you to test your model for success. So yeah, thank you for the time. I really look forward to hearing the showcase. And I think there may be some questions in the chat, so I'll respond to those as we move to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you for this part of the panel. It was quite informative, and I like that it had goodies. So I think if people are listening, there's a lot of things to latch onto. But the sense that I'm getting is that each panelist is a potential webinar. So potentially then I'd really hope and encourage the committee, as much as it's rolling. It's coming to an end. We still have institutions like the Communication Authority of Kenya and the Ministry of ICT to see how to work with us to do more conversations like this. And I also see synergies between UNDP, World Economic Forum, and Standard Chartered, because we seem to be working on the same thing. So how do we collaborate? Let us move quickly into the showcase. And I know the first one has to come very quickly because they had a hard stop. Let me introduce a collaboration between the South Africa Space Agency and Zindi. Celine, you have the floor.
And Diswa was actually going to share the slides. Is Diswa on?
Absolutely, I'm on. Good afternoon. So I'm just going to take the first few slides and then give over to Selini in the true call of collaboration, because this is what this was. So I hope everyone can see our slide. So with the South African Space Agency, we have two mandates that I think are relevant to this conversation today. One part of our mandate is to make sure that we support government in its endeavors to provide service delivery to the people of South Africa. The second one is our contribution to the economic growth through industry development. So when we were hit by COVID-19, we had we dig deep in terms of the satellite archive imagery that we have. We have coverage that goes over 4 decades that covers South Africa. One of the major challenges that we've had over the time was how we actually appropriately exploit all of this imagery. So the emerging technologies like your artificial intelligence and machine learning are quite critical for the exploitation of this imagery. When COVID-19 hit, we engaged our industry to look at what were the products and services that firstly industry had that could be immediately be deployed for government usage. At the second level, we also looked at what are the things that were needing to be developed, especially looking at post-COVID-19 provisions as well. So here on this slide, I'm only mentioning about 3 group of areas, one being the movement of people. And the most interesting aspect into this was when lockdown hit South Africa, we then needed, and we were locked down within the provinces. What the National Disaster Management Center was interested in was, are people actually staying within provinces or not? And so geospatial technology and geospatial information we were able to use this to actually support the disaster management. Air quality movement was the one, carbon dioxide and so forth, to track those. And we can see that as soon as lockdown happened, our skies started to clear, the air quality started to clear over certain population areas. But the most interesting one, of course, was the human settlement layers, the information that government needed to figure out how to provide services and resources to people, in particular, the most disadvantaged of our communities and the most vulnerable of our communities that are in the informal settlements. And our mechanism so far has been manual mechanisms for doing this. The second aspect of that was the informal economy, because as you would know, our countries, we've got these 2 sets of economies, your formal economy and the informal economy. And the informal economy tends to be, again, aligned with the most vulnerable of our communities. So we then looked at the industries to see who we can partner with to actually improve our products and services around this. And we found Zindi, and thanks also to Philip for the introduction early on, African style, as you would say. So we then met up with Zindi and also the Amazon Web Service to look at how we could improve the informal settlement mapping for the Department of Human Settlements as well as for the Department of Small Business. So I will hand over to Zindi, to Selina at this point to talk about the hackathon that we then launched.
Great, thank you, Adiswa. Hi, so I'm Selina. I'm the CEO of Zindi. Zindi's a startup, but we're really an online community of data scientists that are solving important problems like the ones that Andiswa was talking about. We run data science challenges, and we invite our community of over 20,000 data scientists from across Africa and around the world to solve them using machine learning and AI. So we were really excited when Andiswa reached out to us. Thank you, Philip, for the introduction. And, as someone earlier said, COVID kind of opened up all these other ways of thinking about problems or reprioritize the problems that we have. So it was really exciting to be able to help SANSA tackle the challenges that they had in terms of being able to make the process more efficient in terms of identifying where the informal settlements are across the country in South Africa. So the challenge that we launched on Zindi had the objective of developing a machine learning model that could take in the high resolution satellite imagery that SANSA is collecting and to develop a machine learning model that would automate the process of identifying where those informal settlements are down to the GPS coordinates. You can go to the next slide. So ran this challenge with the support of AWS over a 2-day period, a Saturday and a Sunday. We invited our top data scientists. Out of the 20,000 data scientists we have on our platform, we invited the top 200 to join this hackathon over the weekend. And you can see that we got really great global coverage. I mean, not just coverage within Africa, but also around the world. This gives you a sense of the different countries that people came from. We had nearly 200 data scientists come in with nearly 200 unique solutions that were submitted. And you go to the next slide to give you an illustration of what the product ends up looking like. Is essentially you have these types of satellite imagery that SANS is collecting, and how do you make sense of that? How do you make it more, a quicker and almost more real-time process of identifying where are the informal settlements? And what's nice about in the picture on the right-hand side, that shows you more or less what the results look like. And you can see that this gives you an example of 2 different types of settlements. The blue part on the kind of going down the middle is where you can see that the rooftops are a little bit more closer together, they're smaller, they're a little less structured, and that's where the algorithm is actually picking up that these are more likely informal settlements as opposed to the housing that you see in the bottom right hand corner. So just to give you an illustration of what the output actually looks like. So just in conclusion, I mean, this is just one example of the types of problems that we're talking to SANSA about tackling together. And I think what's really exciting is showing how you can leverage these brilliant minds that are across Africa, around the world, and matching them up with these problems that they love to solve and are actually really well positioned to solve. There.
Thank you so much, Celine. And just a plug again, I think between ourselves and the South Africa Space Agency, we are part of a $24 million initiative called Digital Earth Africa that provides analysis-ready data for Africans. So again, would potentially ask you to get in touch with myself or Andiswa as the co-chair of the Technical Advisory Group, but also Zindi is open to collaboration, including with Kenyans, plus the 20,000 data scientists. And there's a lot to learn from them. But also I know that Zindi did work also on Kenya. So I think you potentially want to share with the committee the hackathon results of what you did even in South Africa that you thought had impact or implications on Kenya. Again, I request that we ask Andiswa and Celine, again, women, yay, in space, how they did it and potentially how we can collaborate. Quickly, let me move to another lady. I think there's a bias in this one. Tule from the Agriculture Transformation Office back here in Kenya. Tule, are you there?
To share a presentation.
We didn't hear you.
Hi, Philip. Sorry. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And it's quite a big panel, 120 participants. So I would also like to do a presentation. If I can share screen, can be allowed to share screen, I'll do so just now. Just hold on. Oh dear. Was I unmuted or muted by the host?
No, you're good. We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so I'll try and keep mine to the 5 minutes that I was allotted, even though it's quite a number of slides. So just to give you a quick overview, my name is Tule Linea. I am the Agriculture Transformation Office Coordinator who works for the CS, who's our Minister in Agriculture. And I'm going to I'll just give a quick rundown of how we're looking at digital transformation in agriculture, especially in the context of COVID. So ours is based on our ASTGS, which is our Agriculture Sector Transformation and Growth Strategy, which is our 10-year plan of developing the sector into a commercially viable and modern agricultural sector. And that obviously requires for us to have digital interventions. This is based on our 9 flagships and specifically with regards to building resiliency and sustainability. using digital tools, we have a number of flagships that are focused on that. The first one being our e-voucher program, which is to register 1.4 million farmers to then receive support directly from government, and as well as creating, strengthening our research and innovation and launching a number of priority digital use cases. I'm just giving the background just for a bit of understanding and context understanding. And out of the ASTGS, we have 7 digital use cases. As I explained, one of them being the e-voucher program, and then mostly to ensure that we create cross-cutting support across our, our partners, stakeholders, as well as our ag sector ministries, because it's important that we increase our coordination from being the siloed thinking, which Madam Chairperson actually mentioned earlier in her presentation. As the Agriculture Transformation Office, we're responsible for increasing that collaboration across within the ministry and then across our stakeholders. So how did we respond to COVID-19? At the onset, we established the Food Security War Room, which allowed for us to coordinate across 50 stakeholders. In fact, I think in the end, when we were at our biggest, it was 90 stakeholders. And we had stakeholders and partner counterpart, but also development partners and NGOs, which included AGRA, which was significant support provided to us to make sure that we established the Food Security War Room, as well as Thunderbird, in terms of ensuring that we then had systems in place to ensure that we could actually record the data with regards to food availability, pricing, and accessibility. So when we had our partial shutdown in Kenya, it affected the ability for service providers to deliver food to the markets, because unlike a lot of other more structured economies, Kenya's access to food is mostly through what we call mama mbogas, which is a small kiosk that then is supplied with fresh produce on a daily basis. And that requires for them to still have availability of produce on a daily basis to then make sure that their communities are still fed. And this was what we then, followed through on in terms of assessing. But in the COVID context, we also are struggling with the desert locust. We've had the largest desert locust impact in the last 60 years in Kenya. So with COVID, we were compounded, or rather the locusts compounded by COVID, because they came after, COVID came after our locust issues. So it pushed the ministry to implement a number of digital initiatives that could then, one, surveil and respond to the challenges that counties were facing with regards to desert locusts, but also our food balance sheet in terms of how it affected our stocks. We've been implementing a test version of the digital food balance sheet, which looks at stock, which was also affected by our desert locusts. Production, which allows for forecasting of this season's expected production. Trade, which is our formal, informal flows, both within the country as in across counties, but also with our neighboring, we are a major part of the EAC, East Africa Commission, but we have very open borders with regards to grain trade. Then consumption, which was expected maize consumption by the region. And we've mostly focused on maize as our first value chain that we're assessing, because it is our staple crop or staple food. And then of course the food balance, which is the net effect of all the supply and demand drivers, so that we can understand our current status with regards to our strategic food reserves. And this is available through one of our parastatals, which is CalRO, and it's fbs.calro.org. So out of the Food Security War Room, using information from the digital food balance sheet, we have created digital dashboards, and we're currently in the refining them so that it ensures that we are providing the most accurate information with regards to crop availability, livestock, and fish, because agriculture is not just our crop value chains, it's across livestock and fisheries. And currently the Food Security War Room has now in the process of transitioning from being a disaster response to a more sustainable monitoring committee with regards to our food availability, price, and access. And so we can only do that by having the digital platforms and tools deployed across our 47 counties to ensure that the data is collected appropriately and on time, and that they can then be visualized in using AI. So we have partnered with Microsoft on this in particular, but as well as Esri, also thanks to Philip. So I guess Philip is our main connector across all of us here, to ensure that we then could visualize this data, but also then assess what the impact our interventions were having with regards to access to food, its pricing, and availability across the country. Oh, it looks like my presentation ended. I did have one more slide with regards to our asks, especially in response to our sustainability and resilience of these challenges. Just sorry about that. Interesting. Okay. So it looks like it's my Zoom platform has failed a little bit, Philip, so I'm just going to carry on. See, these are the challenges that we face about responding, working in the digital environment, is that you have to roll with the punches with these issues. Just one more slide. Here it is. So finally for us, similar to as mentioned by Madam Chairperson, there are a number of challenges and solutions that we need to have addressed, right? So the skills for us has been glaringly obvious in terms of the ability for our staff to be able to respond and then effectively work using a digitally enabled work environment. So we need to be able to then have to respond to the retooling requirements and increase collaboration with the private sector, because clearly, a lot of the response and our ability to effectively respond to the challenges some communities were facing with regards to food accessibility came from the private sector. And we have understood, especially coming from our minister's office, is that government should not be in the business of operations. We should be in the business of creating the enabling environment that allows for private sector to then do the work, and we just make sure we support rather than prevent them from being able to do so. So this is what we're talking about in terms of the enabling environment. But the enabling environment is not just for how we affect our stakeholders, but in terms of our internal stakeholders as ourselves as ministry. A steering committee is great, but it's always temporary. So we need to look at having a more comprehensive enabling environment from our ICT counterparts. And I know I'm always trying to have a chat with PS Ochieng on this, as well as Philip, in terms of now looking at how do you build partnerships. You know, government can't do this by itself. You know, and even though COVID-19 support was extraordinary, it was only temporary. So we need to now look at the longer term partnerships and collaborative interventions that are required to support continued digitization of the sector. We want to increase the youth participation. So part of that requires you to have a more open culture with regards to innovation and receiving it. So currently we know that our government structures stifle innovation. I'm from government, so I can say it. And so we need to deploy more flexible arrangements or engagements to allow like the through flow of innovations to and within government. I also have come from previously working in the private sector and understanding that tech talent also changes quite a bit. The tech in itself is also always morphing, and we need to be able to then, government will maybe not be able to keep up in terms of what's happening currently, but at least let's not be so far behind that it takes us a long time to ramp up the digitization of our workplace. But so we were very fortunate that we've had quite a few number of very responsive partners, like I said, that have helped us with consultants that are, working towards making sure that we have a properly digitally enabled workplace. But we want that to be sustainable. And we now need to figure out how to ensure that the resources are available and realigning our budgets towards creating that robust digitally enabled workplace away from the physical interventions and now towards our digital interventions. I think, yes, that is where I end. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you so much, Tule. And when I say Philip, please remember it's the Thunderbird School of Global Management and Arizona State University. This is what a 21st century university should do. Connect nodes of knowledge, but also see how to catalyze change, be very practical. And so
My
I think for us,
yes, Thunderbird.
and I think for us, having a regional office in Nairobi is just a blessing. And we are very fortunate to have partners, including the government of Kenya, but also our other Africa colleagues, to see how we can collaboratively lead, or Africa leading the fourth industrial revolution. Anybody who has questions for Tule is always open to conversations. Again, Q&A and chat. Let me go quickly to, I see Mark Levy has come on. These will be Grade 3 and Sugo Foundation. Let's go to West Africa.
Thank you very much, Philip, and friends and colleagues. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I will give a short presentation, and then my colleague will complete it. We are talking about our experience in Grid 3, which is a partnership devoted to providing access to high-resolution population, settlement, boundary, and facility data to solve development problems. Our experience with regard to COVID-19 data interventions. The way we approached the COVID-19 challenge was informed very heavily by our experience supporting interventions aimed at improving immunization outcomes. This work began in Nigeria. It's now underway in many other sub-Saharan African countries. In brief, the Nigeria experience taught us that no matter how strongly we want to jump straight to the fourth industrial revolution and focus on building data ecosystems that achieve all of the high ambition integration and transformation goals that we care about, if you do not have in place the simple building blocks that were created in the earlier industrial revolutions, it will be very, very hard to succeed, if not impossible. And so the efforts to eradicate polio in northern Nigeria ran into repeated difficulties because they lacked simple information about the location of people. They lacked the ability to delineate the management areas of people responsible for delivering vaccines. They didn't know where all the villages and towns were. And so a rapid effort to put those layers in place led to a reversal of the increase in wild polio cases, and eventually culminating in the declaration of Nigeria as polio-free earlier this year. The success there led very rapidly to spreading the same innovations to other immunization campaigns. First measles, then yellow fever, and now all routine immunizations are using these same data innovations because they work. The success drives diffusion. So other sectors are now picking up the same things, and success drives adoption by the government. So in the course of 2.5 years, the Grid 3 Nigeria is turning over the entire operation to the Nigerian government. It's one of the fastest transfers I've seen of a major innovation like that. And then, so COVID-19, we emphasized the availability of innovative ways using all the fancy data science, data collection technologies, machine learning, many of the things that have been discussed earlier, to harness those to produce a very old-fashioned set of data sets, location of people, location of settlements, and so on, and to pull them together as fast as possible to meet COVID-19 response needs. The table summarizes where we've been active. I'll just highlight a few of the lessons. Some of the lessons were expected, that when you have these data sets available in an accessible open platform, people can do things like promote better social distancing, monitoring and regulation. They can get a better handle on where mobility presents opportunities and challenges and so on. But there were many unexpected lessons as well. One was that we'd expected a big focus on the public health related data sets. Every government was very, very interested in looking beyond health at the downstream impacts from the pandemic and wanting spatial data sets related to unemployment, to food security, and so on. And so we've been rapidly trying to help meet those needs. And then a third unexpected lesson was the simple act of putting up an open, accessible spatial data hub helped drive rapid increase in demand for more data, in demand for applications making use of these data, and for interest, serious interest in pursuing integrated data solutions to complex problems. So what we found is that just putting up a data hub, which can be done very quickly, had more impact than hundreds or thousands of workshops trying to promote the merits of these kinds of activities. And then just finally, one sad lesson is that a lot of the ambitions the governments came to us with that they were hoping our data solutions would address could not be met because there was insufficient prior investment in just basic data infrastructure. The most common deficiency in the baseline data had to do with spatial information about health facilities. You can't make that data gap up in the course of a few weeks. That takes more like a few months. And so that was a sad reminder that there's some basic catch up that we have to do if we're going to achieve the full potential of all the innovations we're talking about today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. But that, I think, just also to acknowledge that the work of Grid 3 would not have been possible without the Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data.
Oh,
We've
yes.
been collaborating a lot.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
At scale. The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Honorable Rachel Omamo, is actually our board member. So we are really fortunate to have the Global Partnership here. We have about 2 Kenyans as part of the partnership. I know Karen is on the call and Dev is on the call, but then it opens up opportunities for collaboration. So can we have Nigeria presentation continue? Mute. Thanks, Lola.
I was wondering why you weren't answering. Hello, Philip. I'd also like to share my presentation, please. If I can. Am I able to do that? Okay, excellent. So, good afternoon, everybody. It is nice to be here to talk to everyone, and I'm a little under the weather today, so excuse any sort of pauses, but I'd like to run through my presentation just very quickly, talking about the coronavirus response hub that we have. Before I start, actually, I also like to say hello to Elsie, who I haven't seen in quite a while. So hi, Elsie. So just going quickly, MBS, I wanted to share this because it's important to the success of the hub. We are the National Statistics Office in Nigeria, and we have offices in every state and the FCT. And we also have 6 zonal offices, and we are the coordinator of the National Statistical System. And to also mention some of the key roles that precipitated our involvement. Sorry, I'm just gonna try and move this, for MBS during the pandemic to provide key social economic indicators. We also had the National Longitudinal Food Survey, which is done in conjunction with the World Bank. But there was also increased demand across federal government MDAs for data, specifically to inform like fiscal and monetary, and also the public health response. And we felt a strong responsibility to be able to collate and disseminate COVID-19 data on one central platform, because we had a situation where data was coming from everywhere, but there was no central location where the public or even the CSOs can go to get data about the response. And the key policy enablers for us at MBS was that MBS actually has a constitutional mandate to collect data from any MDA across the country, both for subnational and national level as well. And also MBS as an agency was under the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, which also hosts the GREET 3 project that Mark was talking about earlier. So there was really good synergy early on and good buy-in earlier on with the government and using GREET 3 data. And MBS is also represented on the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. So we also have access to data that's generated through that task force. And in general, MBS enjoys a goodwill, both with the public and internally within the government MDAs. We've really worked over the last 6-7 years on providing timely data, accurate data, transparency. So we were really in a great position to leverage on our capacity within the agency. Now, for the timeline, we initially were contacted by GPSTD in April about possible partnerships across both private and public sector partnerships in Africa, outside of Africa. And we were really excited about this. Particularly, we were excited about the opportunity to use spatial technology, geospatial data, and to be able to showcase the spread using GRID 3 data as well. So that started out in April, and just to show the progression, the quick progression from April to June when we actually launched the website. So it did take a few months, and in that time we had garnered partnerships with quite a few key partners, and we launched. Since then, we've also added obviously some other information. I believe Sergo Foundation is going to present later on. We were working with Imperial University as well, and Oxford University as well on some of the data that they've done. And we really just wanted it to be a one-stop shop for everything related to COVID and the response in Nigeria. I've mentioned it, Mark has given a presentation on it just now, but really it couldn't have been done without GRID 3 and a lot of the work that has already been done, particularly in reference to polio or mapping out healthcare or schools. As I mentioned here, there's about 500,000 points of interest in Nigeria that was already mapped and georeferenced. So it was really easy for us to take some of the data, such as treatment centers or isolation centers, and match it up with data that's already available using GRID 3. And ESRI, which is the international supplier for Geographic Information System, through ArcGIS, obviously, they provided a lot of help, hand-holding, training for our staff, troubleshooting, and improving just the general process of us finding data and how best to display that data for the use of the public and of government. And of course, the Nigerian Center for Disease and Control, which was managing the pandemic and is the public health agency in Nigeria. It's a key relationship, obviously, but it's also a very challenging relationship because there are several challenges about data sharing, how quickly that data can be shared, how quickly can that data be uploaded, issues of data ownership. So there was a lot of tussle that we had to go through, and we still actually go through in terms of making data available around the pandemic. So this is just the general structure of the hub. We focused on just three key areas, which is linking pages to official government data, sources for response activities, monetary response, movement, self-assessment, guidance, and all of that. And the second part is a compilation of available dashboards that were created by MDAs or research institutions or private sector organizations. And we've really tried to partner, this is where we've really tried to partner with organizations, both locally and internationally, outside of government, who have been doing analysis or who have GIS capacity. We also reached out to data scientists from the Nigerian diaspora. So we have interns that are working on it from the UK and from the US, just to help us utilize the tools that ArcGIS provides. And we also have the analyzed data, mainly using grade 3 data, like I mentioned, using incidence data, socioeconomic data, and health indicators to really provide a robust overview of the incidents and the response. So some of the impacts and results, I get asked that a lot. It's hard to quantify. We do know that, you know, we can look at the site visits, but we know that that doesn't tell the whole story. So for example, the dashboard precipitated the task force dashboard. They didn't have one before, but seeing, and we had to work with them and also train them using some of our partnerships with Esri. Seeing the usefulness of that, they were also able to provide a lot more information about resource and capacity use, which is unprecedented from a committee at that level to be able to provide real-time data and information. There's also a greater awareness of the rate of infection across Nigeria and the resources deployed in the response, including financial resources. And there's been greater demand within government in Nigeria for that centralized information. We've had communication also from donor agencies about specific further research on the impact of COVID on agriculture, on businesses, on small businesses, on young people, on women. So we've had a lot of interest generated just from having the data hub. The other one is the interest in geospatial units, creating one within our NSO, which we didn't have before. And we've already had initial discussions with partners in terms of furthering our geospatial capacity within the Bureau of Statistics. And this is a particularly significant development. Without COVID-19, I think someone else said, given the effects of the pandemic, there was still some blessing within it. And this would be really the main blessing for us, is that we're able now to pursue having this unit within the National Statistics Office. And post-COVID, that's really the first thing where we would be working on, continuation of collaboration with Esri. Obviously, in terms of Grid 3, we're also now quite invested in the outputs of that. So I see us continuing along that path. And just epidemic and disease information post-COVID. We had a Lassa fever outbreak just earlier in the year, it's still ongoing, which MBS wasn't tracking at all previously. So we now have the tools to do that, to be able to provide more robust information on that. So the key learnings, I'll just wrap up very quickly. The key learnings was that the response is to both the health and the socioeconomic impact requires vast amount of data and data coordination. And while data coordination is always, you know, a challenge, it really was evident how much we have to work towards that on data ownership and things like that, because they really got in the way. Obviously, geospatial and mobile data, increasingly relevant, especially when you're talking about a national statistic office. We tried with this, for example, to look at mobility data, but we had some challenges within our government about some policy around the use of mobile information. So That obviously brings up a new set of policy outlook that we need to work on to be able to provide better geo-referenced data. And also it just brought out the importance of the National Statistics Office as a key partner in national planning, because nobody else, and there was nowhere else where you could actually have the mandate to aggregate information and provide it in real time, accessible to everybody, transparent and accessible. So I think for us, those are key gains and opportunities going forward. I mentioned some of our partnerships that we've worked on that we hopefully going forward we can continue. So it's really been a busy time, but a very, very productive exercise for us. And we'd like to, like you mentioned, there's Victor and there's Davis on the line, just to extend our thanks and their commitment really to making this happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lola. Quickly, let me run to the next presentation and just remind you that we already ran over, so please be a bit short. Thank you. Mute. Just to alert the panelists that she's on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll start over. There was some issue with my my phone. Yeah, I'm just going to take 5 minutes to walk you through our work at the Sergo Foundation. We created a COVID-19 Community Vulnerability Index, which we were able to integrate with the Nigeria COVID-19 Data Hub, really building on the fantastic work that Grid3 and the NBS have done and already spoken to you about. So Sergo Foundation integrates behavioral science and AI to bring precision to solutions. And when we talk of precision, we talk about designing the right intervention for the right person at the right time. Of late, our work has been focused on supporting the COVID-19 response. And the cornerstone of our portfolio really has been this Community Vulnerability Index. We first developed it for the United States, and it's now featured as a CDC resource. But in recent months, we've created a companion version for Africa as well. And what the CCVI is a tool to inform the COVID-19 response at a subnational level. It measures vulnerability, which we define as the social, economic, and health impact. So we're not talking about where the disease was spread, but instead looking at the impact when it does. So this index tells us which areas are vulnerable and why. And it can be used to design targeted interventions and prioritize resources to those who need them the most. This is essentially what goes into the index. We look at 7 themes ranging from socioeconomic status to health system factors and old age. And we drew on a host of publicly available data sets to really create this multi-dimensional vulnerability metric. It's hosted on an online tool. So you can go to precisionforcovid.org/Africa, and it allows readers to explore vulnerability scores within a country or across countries, and also look at a breakdown by these individual themes. The tool is only as good as its use, and we've been working very closely with GPSDD, and through them, we were very fortunate to be introduced to the NBS in Nigeria. given that there's a COVID data hub where a lot of relevant data sets are housed, we worked with them to embed our information onto this website. So since we have data from all countries in Africa, we had to really create a country profile. So we now have country URLs that can be embedded onto data hubs. And this is the example of what a country fact sheet looks like for Nigeria, which we were able to embed onto the data hub. In terms of the impact, it allows users to sort and compare metrics at a regional level. So you can look at different regions in Nigeria and see how they fare on the various vulnerability metrics. We were also able to add data on mobility, pre and post pandemic. And we were also able to estimate hospitalization and infection fatality rates, which people could look at by assuming different percentages of population infected. So I'll just wrap up there just to say, thanks to the NDS and VPSDD for, forming the connections. We're also working with ministries of health in Africa to create detailed versions of these index. So it's currently available at the first administrative level, and we're eager to deep dive to the district level. We're also creating dashboards to layer data sets on, confirmed cases, deaths, and testing, and really working with organizations across the continent to help them take a targeted approach towards, planning the interventions and allocating resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahul. And there's a question in the chat. Somebody wants to connect, and my sense is that if you can also provide a way within which innovators or entrepreneurs in this space can connect with your platform, then that becomes interesting, I think, for this conversation.
Absolutely.
On to the next presentation. Thank you so much, Rahul.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm presenting from Ghana, and we're wanting to share something very quickly about a pilot project we're doing around citizen-generated data. And so this is an area where we've been able to bring in tech entrepreneurs, local leaders, and ministry officials to work together to develop 2 solutions to fill data gaps within the SDGs. So this came from the rationale that we are only reporting around 1/3 of the SDG indicators at the moment, so we're looking at new ways and new data sources. But this looked at the fact that technology provides a great opportunity to springboard into filling these data gaps. And a project that we're funding by GIZ, the German development partner, looked at how citizen-generated data might be the key way to strengthen the local data system by strengthening citizens as data generators and using technology as a way to fill that gap. So here's a short description of the approach of the project. So it's looking at gathering information on gender and waste. And the project is all based in collaboration. So we are, as the National Statistics Office, the data producers, and working very closely with the data users as co-owners of the project. We also wanted to anchor this in a human rights approach to the data, where the citizens are involved in both the planning and the production. And we thought that the best way to go about this was a design thinking process. And that's what I'll just quickly take us through. So because we needed citizens to take up these solutions in order for us to get enough volume of data to make these proxy indicators, we really wanted to think about what would increase user adoption. And we came across the process of design thinking, where actually we're really centering all of the design decisions around the realities that citizens are living in, and the context in which these technologies will either work or not work. And so we took this kind of ecosystem approach, which echoes some of what has been said earlier, and looked at the different roles in the data chain of everyone who was involved. So we have everyone from our local authorities and local planners, to government ministries, to academia, to the developers themselves. And we took our developers through a 3-stage design thinking process. So this was quite different to their normal approach, where we may have prescribed what the functionality of the solutions were going to be for data collection, and then just taken those solutions out into community. Instead, we brought together 70 different stakeholders, between the developers, the national technical team and district technical teams, so our 2 levels of governance, and also core users, the audiences that we expect to use this technology at the end of the day. We brought them together in a 3-day process called the Design Thinking Event, Understanding the Problem. And the idea here was to create a shared understanding of what was needed to make this a adoptable product. And this was the first time that our developers had been involved in this. We did a shortlisting process, and so only 8 development firms came through to this stage. So it's quite different from the hackathon in the sense that we are really concentrating on creating a deep understanding with a few development organizations. And so we took those developers then through a process. They were to present to us their idea, so their concept, that would meet our need for citizen-generated data, and then after that submit a prototype. So we went from 8 development firms down to 1, and they produced these 2 solutions that we're using currently for citizen-generated data. So I'm very quickly just going to take you through the lessons learned. So we found that when developers were able to test their assumptions with those that are surrounded by and steeped in the knowledge of the local context, they were able to create something that was much more useful. A big outcome of this was around making sure that neither of the solutions were dependent on literacy, and so there were it was built in that there was a voice alternative to all of the data collection solutions. And there was also the idea that some of our pilot communities do not have the digital infrastructure where they would have regular internet. So we also have made sure that there were feature phone alternatives for every data collection solution that was built. We also found that it created this this collaborative environment where we could bring together people in person at the start of the process, then created this commitment to collaboration through the remainder of the project. And so just some last lessons. Because COVID struck in the middle of this process, we had that first in-person encounter, and then we had to move the process online. So that meant using Zoom and using digital tools in order to ensure that our local actors spread in pilot districts across the country were still able to participate. And again, there were difficulties with the digital infrastructure for making sure that we're not then leaving people out of the process because they weren't digitally included. And so we designed a process to make sure that their opinions could be brought in throughout. And as an output, we now have these 2 solutions that are being piloted in communities. So I'm sure that we'll be sharing results from this in early 2021, and GPSDD have been involved in this process all along. And so we look to mainstream this approach of design thinking into some of our other processes at GSS. So we see this idea of whenever we are taking technologies in future, instead looking at it from the community reality upwards, and how we can adapt the technologies to make sure that they are going to be, there's going to be a high user adoption at the end of the day. So that was just a very quick overhaul of what we're doing in the collaborative space, and that kind of fostering of collaborations with technology sector in Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and sorry for rushing you on the presentation. I think for me, the last 4 presentations are also kind of to begin to disrupt the mindset of startups and people in the innovation space. The last 4 presentations were led by government. So I think this is something that has to go through very clear. And you can see how when African public sector adopts technology, they can actually lead, but also I think can collaborate quite effectively and respond, yes, but also to think through how these systems and innovations can be resilient and live beyond a crisis. The last presentation, I hope the vice chair of the committee is here. I know he had a hard stop, Peter Njonjo, if he can give his comments. If not, we can close. Okay, I guess he had to drop. So I think, finally, I think for me, in my closing remarks, it's basically just to think through that we're in a situation where the pandemic basically has put us in a situation where it is no longer thought through as a linear pandemic, that it's not about responding, then recovery, then we build resilience over time. I think it's flipping the model. And the model is, how do we build resiliency so that we can respond faster and recover faster? And throughout the showcase, but also from the keynote of the chair, it's all about building resiliency. It's how do we do the fundamentals, whether it's around capacity and competencies, whether it's around an agile governance framework that actually enables innovators to collaborate with government, whether it's about innovative financing. Yes, Peter. Let me just go through back to you before I wrap up. I was trying to buy time. Back to you, VC.
Okay. Thank you so much, Philip. So mine is not a presentation. I don't have any slides. I will just talk through. And one of the things that I was to share was around the lessons from Trigger Foods. You know, as we raise funding, as we're trying to scale the business, and what it is that we can actually share with everybody else. I think one of the key things, you know, especially for companies that are raising funding in the early stages, is around what I call management capability. A lot of times, you know, we present a strategy, but we don't spend time thinking about, you know, do I have the capability that will be required to then deliver against this strategy? So one of the things that we learned very early on is building a strong team that demonstrates the ability to execute against a strategy is critical. The second thing that we learned is, as an entrepreneur, you need to have skin in the game. When you start a business, what the investors want to see is how vested are you in the enterprise. And because of that, what I learned is that, you know, making those early investments in the business helped, at least when it came to raising of capital. The third most important thing is around governance. And how do you then ensure that, you know, the organization is well structured so that somebody who's then going to invest money in that organization feels comfortable that their investment is safe. So again, we spent quite a bit on governance in the early stages. In terms of the challenges that I faced, you know, with my co-founder as we set up the business in the early stages, I think the first one was, you know, when you don't have access to capital, attracting the management talent was again a bit of a challenge. So how we overcome this challenge was by issuing equity to some of our earlier management recruitees. And because of that, we're able to attract the right type of talent that made us very, very compelling when we shared this with investors, you know, just looking at the strategy that we were pursuing and the management team. The second bit is, you know, I talked about putting skin in the game. One of the big challenges that we faced as Trigger is that early stage capital was, of course, a huge challenge. And funding the business was hard in the early days. So what my wife and I ended up doing is that we sold our matrimonial home and invested the proceeds in the business. And that's how we actually got the company to a point where it was investable. Because, you know, with everybody else who was in the company then, they were non-investing partners. So again, the challenge was on me in terms of trying to find a source of capital. So again, that will be the second challenge, which I think is a challenge that's very, very common even with the businesses that we've looked at. Then the third piece is also the structuring process and ensuring that, you know, you're able to protect the integrity of a business, even operating in a tough environment. You know, I remember the due diligence process that we underwent with Goldman Sachs. We had to, of course, be audited in line with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and the UK Anti-Bribery Act. And in all those two due diligence processes, you know, we managed to pass the exercise. And this is with having hundreds of vehicles on the road every day, exposed to all sorts of situations on our roads, especially with the rent-seeking behavior that we see with some of the law enforcement officers at the lower levels. And again, ensuring that, how do you ensure that you create a culture within the organization that even if your distribution van is stopped, then send a lawyer to start negotiating and put a bond for it. You do that a few times and people kind of stop bothering you because they know that nothing will come out. So the key thing is that what are some of the things that I've seen as vice chair of the COVID ICT committee, and what are some of the observations? I think one of the key things that I have seen is that, there's a lot of brilliant minds that we have, not just in Kenya, but across the continent. And I think this talks to the opportunity that lies in on the continent. When you look at bulk of where money is spent, the basic problems to be solved in food, healthcare, education, and transport. So, and again, we've seen a lot of new innovative ideas in this space. One thing I felt that was a recurring need, especially as the innovations were shared, was the need of mentorship, especially around how do you think of a business in a way that creates value, even outside of a technical innovation. So a lot of people would focus on the technical innovation, but don't step back to then think about how do I then create value from this? So because when you're asking for somebody to invest in your business, then you have to demonstrate how you're going to give a return against that investment. So again, there's a bit of mentorship there. And I think that there's an opportunity for more established entrepreneurs or more established professional managers to dedicate time in giving back to young entrepreneurs who are in the early stages of their ventures. The third piece is around the need for seed capital, because one of the things that was very, very clear is that there is a lot of funding that's available for more mature organizations. If you're raising $1 million plus, it looks like, there's a vibrant ecosystem for you as a business. The problem is that if you're looking at raising between $0 and $500,000, that's a very, very tough space because no one's really playing in that space. And I think this is somewhere where we really need to put our heads together in terms of how to create a vibrant ecosystem that provides this type of startup capital, because without that, you cannot have proof of concept. And then the last piece is also a huge opportunity for incubators to help businesses build the requisite governance and the requisite structures to actually attract investment. So those are my main observations serving on the committee. And the last piece was around the policy perspective. What are some of the key things that we feel that from a policy standpoint, we could look at implementing? I think one of the things is that, we need to create platforms that provide better transparency on harnessing innovation and protecting intellectual property. By having this COVID ICT committee and openly seeking ideas around innovation with the public, we attracted over 700 entries of different people giving us different ideas around innovation. And that's because also we created a safe environment for those entrepreneurs to feel that their intellectual property was safe if they were to then share their ideas with us. And I think, on an ongoing basis, I think there's a need for that to ensure that, the openness of young people coming up with new innovations and sharing them does not end with the life of this committee. The second piece, I think, also is that the government needs to create greater awareness on what the government agencies are doing around innovation. I mean, we had presentations from institutions like Kenya, who are doing an amazing piece of work around creating an enabling environment for innovation in the country. But I think this work is happening in pockets and it's really not visible to the external world. And I think there's an opportunity for us to have more visibility for what government is doing in that space, but also ensuring that these institutions are funded for the potential impact. If you want to create $1 billion businesses out of technology, then again, I think you then need to have an investment that is commensurate to the opportunity that you are chasing as a government. And I think there's an opportunity just to scale a bit of the investments that is sitting in some of these agencies. But again, you see the capability, you see the energy, you see the enthusiasm and passion, and there's, I think, a lot of energy in that space. And then the last piece around policy, I think, is to create better linkages between government innovation initiatives and private sector funded hubs. Because on one hand, you have private sector funds saying we do not have enough deal pipeline. And on the other hand, you have the innovation hub saying maybe we're not getting enough high quality innovations. And I think the key thing is that, if there's better collaboration between these two pieces, I think we could actually start creating an ecosystem that creates a little bit more momentum as far as harnessing innovation in the country is concerned. So, Philip, I think those are just some of the insights I wanted to share on my journey in Twiga and my journey on the committee, and also some of the policy perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. I don't think there's really anything more to add after your insights. It's a true masterclass, and if we could cut that piece of a video and potentially share that, it would be quite interesting. I think it comes down to the basics. It's the soft skills, right? It's the business acumen. It's being able to have an agile governance framework. It's to collaborate. Is the issue of self-sacrifice. They kind of just raw sheer hard work. That it's not about expecting somebody to invest if you've not invested in the business opportunity. And I think for me, that's really speaks of the African narrative. And it could be, whatever you've just presented could be a story of Ghana who are in this call. It could be a story of Nigeria. It could be a story of South Africa. We just did not have time, but we also had Sierra Leone. We had Senegal. And it could simply be an African story where how do we potentially then understand that we have these building blocks? We have the opportunity, we have the talent. Africa's median age is 19.7. We're the youngest population ever. As Elsie mentioned in her presentation, young people see this as an opportunity. So how do we not waste a good crisis? Susan mentioned the opportunity for young women. The chair mentioned what you have done amazingly over the last 5-6 months in terms of identifying the pillars and the levers that need to be disrupted so that we can unlock innovative potential, whether it's from the idea stage to the VC stage and to social impact, which is what Susan, I think, was talking about, the SDG opportunity. That SDG presents business opportunity. Some of us see it as a development opportunity, but that, again, money could be made. And I think to what the PS Jerome made when he was speaking from the CS speech, to a lead in terms of that collaboration between the UNDP and the government of Kenya to create this resilient lab or accelerator that then wants to begin to test these 3 innovations that came out of Konza and potentially use that as a learning. The other piece, I think, would be how do we also connect with you, who was on the other side, even as these 3 nascent innovations are powered through, the lessons that you've learned could be quite useful for these 3 innovations that I think are coming up. And potentially also I see the opportunity at continental level where we have big private sector companies. And that is something that I've seen rolling through all the presentations, that you had an established entity, whether it was Esri, Google, Facebook, Frame, there was somebody who was established, who was ready and open and willing to work with an upcoming startup, but also collaborate with government. And so for me, that then begins to show how collaboration works in terms of how you build upon something that is already established so that you don't make the same mistakes, but also you don't necessarily have the same levers or financial capability that they have. So I think for me, that has been interesting and as a lesson for this webinar, that was potentially a showcase of what is possible if we collaborate beyond COVID-19 and how we build resiliency to manage another crisis. I think when you go to Tule's presentation, she talked about we were in the middle of a locust and COVID happened. So then how do we build resiliency so that we are not always responding, but simply turn this mechanism to respond, but then beyond resiliency, then we use that as an opportunity for transformation and growth. And I think for me, that would what I'd want to end, and just to thank, of course, the ICT committee for co-hosting this with us, the Secretariat, Rehab, and Dr. Njau, Grid 3 Global Partnership for being able to help us mobilize Ghana, and Nigeria for South African government, and SANSA, for LC, for Dr. Elsie Kanza and the World Economic Forum, for UNDP, Walid, for Susan and Stanbic, for the chair, of course, and the CS for providing this enabling environment. Thank you so much, and hope that we can connect soon beyond this platform.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Philip.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks. Thanks, Thunderbird.
Thanks, Walid.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Philip.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.